first speakers, Rachel Healy and Neil Armfield, the Joint Artistic Directors of the Adelaide Festival. Please welcome.
We're sharing a mic again.
Hi everyone. First of all, we would like to also acknowledge that we're here today on Kaurna land and pay respects to our elders. Thank you so much, Uncle Mickey, for that warm welcome.
If only we had listened to the wisdom of First Nations across the world, we wouldn't be needing to have this conference today. And I should also thank Manar and say that my shirt more or less fitted, and so I'm wearing it. Unprecedented change requires an unprecedented response. This event is an attempt to find new ways of bringing more people into the conversation through storytelling and creativity, and moving from a place of talking to one of action.
It's a conversation we've been having at the Adelaide Festival for a while. Up until maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I'd never heard of the phrase "Fleegs come." And I learned that that was the reason that some of our writers from across the globe were not going to come to Writers' Week. It literally means flight shame. It's about people taking responsibility for the air miles and the carbon footprint that they personally create, and actually asking themselves, do I need to take that flight? For an international arts festival, that's very confronting. We were created in 1960 in the model of the Edinburgh International Festival, which in itself was created in the aftermath of the Second World War, which was all about having creativity and creative imagination leading a way in which countries could unite, in which we could understand and explore the common experiences that we all share across the globe, but also the differences that artists in different countries have. And so Adelaide Festival is a festival that includes local artists, artists from around the country, but always a really significant component of international artists. And so the idea that Fleegs come was the reason that people weren't coming was both an existential problem and a very practical problem. The way that we decided to tackle this was we took a first step really of measuring our emissions. It felt really the basic principle of if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. We didn't know really what kind of footprint or the size of the footprint we were creating, not just with the flights, but with the simple journey from somebody coming from the suburbs into the city, parking their car, watching a show and leaving again. Every aspect of our organisation needed to be put under the microscope to really understand the kind of impact we were having. So we did that in our first year. We measured it in the number of tonnes, and we offset that as part of really, as I say, a first step. We invested, our offsets were spent in a wind farm in Gujarat in India. It really was the first step of the journey, because every year we have learnt more and more about how we can reduce our footprint rather than just offset it. We are aware now that there is all kinds of challenges around offsetting. Many people see it as greenwashing. I guess the point is that this has been a journey that we started, and at the moment there is learning in every single year. It's challenging, it's extremely important, and we feel like as we take this journey, we need to show leadership in our arts community and more broadly about how we can navigate our core business of running an international festival with our really number one commitment to protect the planet. Some of the things that we have been doing has been simple things like developing a Green Artist Guide with Green Music Australia, including an opt-in and opt-out for merchandising.
Last year, all waste from outdoor sites was diverted from landfill And in 22, we are working to phase out single-use plastics and champion reusables across all operations and venues.
We implemented an 80% vegetarian policy across all corporate hospitality and events and functions, which is a huge amount across our 17-day festival. And we're transitioning to 100% vegetarian from next year.
Switch default staff super to an ethical fund.
This is a new initiative. One of the things that Bea, who's our sustainability coordinator, has educated our staff on is she said if you do nothing else, even if you don't turn off the lights or your computer when you leave at night, if you do nothing else, contact your super fund and see where they are investing your super, because individually we are probably all supporting fossil fuels by virtue of the way our investments are flowing.
We've continued to reduce printing and paper to use digital day bills, no dates on t-shirts and things, collateral, e-tickets, no direct mail, and an opt-in guide.
And as has been mentioned, we're teaming up with Reforest to creatively engage audience members in our journey to net zero.
Last month, we also brought representatives from South Australia's cultural sector together to talk about some of these issues, including First Nations voices in leadership and decision-making, decolonisation of structures and systems, meaningful collaboration and resource sharing, shift from adaptation and mitigation to regeneration, development of a centralised resource database for climate initiatives, and hyper local resource sharing for South Australia. The role of art and culture in helping to lead the social transformation promised in the Paris Agreement, and of course acknowledging the complexity of all of these challenges and working together as a sector to find solutions.
Yesterday, commentators suggested we should applaud the Prime Minister for at least admitting that Australia was becoming harder to live in. But then the Deputy Prime Minister described Lismore as having experienced a once-in-a-thousand-year flood. A few weeks before, the Minister for Emissions Reduction said he was extremely disappointed about a company's decision to close a coal-fired power station early. Then the Finance Minister and Treasurer discussed ways of legally subverting a takeover bid from a buyer who would rapidly phase out AGL's entire fossil fuel portfolio. The opposition tiptoed delicately around their timid policy because otherwise we'll get another 4 years of infuriating head-in-the-sand stalling at a time when critically important decisions need to be made for humanity and all living things. We need to change the narrative. It's a cliche, but we do. Once in 1,000 years is an ancient narrative. It's laughable. But it also gives people who are suffering terribly comfort and hope, and so it's an attractive narrative. In the arts, we like to talk about storytelling. It's supposed to be what we're good at. But people tell themselves stories and they have their favourites. It takes a pretty exceptional storyteller to persuade them to let the old one go. Unprecedented change requires an unprecedented response. Let's get down to it. We are now delighted to introduce Alison Tickell, founder and CEO of Julie's Bicycle. She's streaming in from the UK. I will say personally, it's an incredible privilege to have Alison as part of this event. I first saw her speak in 2011, where she was in Melbourne for the International Federation of Arts Council's summit, and I really don't remember much at all about the summit except Alison, who was absolutely dazzling in her advocacy and her passion, and the way that she has found practical solutions for all arts workers to grapple with the challenge of climate change.
Have a great day with us, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That was a really lovely introduction. Thank you also, Uncle Mickey. Manal, my shirt doesn't fit either. You can see it, it's very big. Neil, and so many of you who have made this happen, British Council, Australia Council for the Arts, Adelaide Festival, and so many of you. I'm really glad to be here and to be part of this important day. I wish I was with you in that beautiful sunny green space. Because of course the climate and ecological crisis needs us, all of us, to work quickly, collaboratively and creatively. And I just want to breathe a little bit into this moment, to appreciate everyone here and to thank you for showing up, because it is a difficult time, full of turbulence and contradictions. Last week, the United Nations released another deeply alarming report about the state of Mother Earth. But the United Nations also secured a global agreement on plastic reduction, widely celebrated as a game changer. I don't know how much that has been felt in the world, but it's really important. And the energy crisis that began before these catastrophic events in Ukraine exposed fossil fuels as geopolitical weaponry, has increased demand for more of those very same fossil fuels. I've just heard, you know, in Australia the issues around fossil fuels are deeply problematic. Yet new commitments to accelerate the renewable energy transition were unthinkable a fortnight ago. But overall it is a difficult moment for us all, and for you, Australia, so abundant in natural and human heritage, with so much knowledge, experiencing yet again extreme climate change impacts. And we have to ask ourselves, how has it got to this? Nearly 15 years ago, Julie's bicycle set out on a journey of discovery which has, for me, answered this question. I didn't set out with this question in mind, not at all. We set out to come up with a practical response to reducing our environmental impacts and thought we would solve climate change. We thought by explaining the problem to colleagues, by creating practical tools and know-how, hey presto, problem solved. I genuinely thought that that would do the trick. And for sure, it got us started, but it doesn't take long to realise that nothing less than radical transformation is needed. The climate crisis is not getting any better, and that everything we do counts. We now work, Julie's Bicycle, a team of about 24 of us, we work internationally, mobilising thousands of organisations and artists on climate action, with a growing community of friends and pioneers in this field. And I've had some fantastic experiences with some of you here today. Rachel, Helen, thank you for being on this journey. So the answer to this crucial question of how we got here is actually, I think it's remarkably simple. The climate crisis is in reality a cultural crisis, where the values that have built the modern global economy, championing consumption for a global minority, and that having things fixed, material and preferably owned will make us happy. We all know this ideology, and we just need to remember it's created an enduringly uneven global economic system, dispossessed millions of people of land and livelihoods, and degraded the natural world. And that means that we need to work extra hard, particularly as beneficiaries, the Europeans particularly, who have taken the vast majority of this wealth. To keep this economy motoring, we've mechanised nature, invented a myth of what nature is to suit our economy, as hostile, there to exploit, to engineer, to sell, to improve. The climate crisis is a very simple way of interrupting these pernicious stories. If nature were understood as a web of life, dynamic, nourishing, interdependent, within and beyond us, creative beyond our wildest imaginations, as many Indigenous people, earth scientists, ecologists, and indeed artists are telling us, perhaps climate change would just be that. And of course that means it's up to us, especially artists and creative activists, to give the scientists and politicians a helping hand to interrupt these stories ourselves. Seeking and speaking truth is fundamentally what the arts are about. Designing for an economy is fundamentally what the creative industries are about, and the stewarding of past and present is what cultural heritage is all about. Culture, and all of us who connect to it, have so much to give to this moment. So what's to be done? Well, we can, as has already been said, we can make changes, and many of you are making changes individually and in your work, but we are so much better working together. And I think the creative community has an extra responsibility to lead, not just to do this stuff, but to lead it. We know what the problems are if we choose to sit with them And we also, if we sit with them for long enough, we know what the answers are. Of course, they are rapid and urgent decarbonising. I just want to challenge the whole project of net zero. The problem with net zero is that it is in that word net, which actually is a beautiful word. It carries within it the reality of a lot of holes, and it also has the acronym of no. The issue with net zero is that we don't have enough. We don't have enough of the net of the paying for carbon actually to go round. So we need to start talking not about net zero. We talk about absolute reductions, and we talk about complete decarbonisation. This is really important because net zero is being co-opted by big business and by governments as an easy way to talk about climate action, and it is not enough. We need to protect and restore our biodiversity and wildlife as if our lives depended on it, because indeed they do. And we need to make a world without waste. The concept of waste does not exist in the natural world. We have created this idea. It isn't too hard to map cultural activities across to these big ideas, and there are so many people, most of you in Adelaide today now are part of that community, and so many tools to help us on our way. For at least 2 decades, creative pioneers have been clearing the thicket for us all. But it does mean working together, collaborating and connecting with the places and the people around us generously and intimately. And that is, as we've already said, is very challenging to us all as cultural communities, as artists. It's very hard to subvert the traditional model of business and actually come together and think about doing less, giving more, and giving generously. And the contributors that you'll hear today have all plunged into this beautiful, big project. I personally can't think of many creative challenges as exciting, dynamic, hopeful, responsible, or inspiring as this one. And if you're not already engaged in this, you are going to have such fun. Today, artists and cultural activists are pushing climate action everywhere, all over the world. I come across them every day in every corner of the globe, some visibly on big platforms, but many more woven into communities, the distinctions between art, culture, and everyday activism becoming increasingly irrelevant. Artists and activists are using their platforms to make their own and other voices heard, reflecting, documenting, and in dialogue with the changes unfolding in our homes and our ecosystems, moulding grief and anger into courage and power. Artists and activists are inventing and experimenting with the technologies we need for tomorrow. Venues, festivals, museums, galleries, studios, recreating themselves as laboratories for decarbonisation, spaces for nature and community, preserving, validating and restoring precious knowledge as places of refuge in this tilting world. Artists and activists are helping people connect with their own creativity, regaining a sense of agency, and turning active creators into shaping conceptual worlds, making and sustaining communities. And of course, art disrupts complacent thinking and uncovers these difficult truths, liberating old habits and helping us reframe challenges, seeing things from new perspectives. And art gives us permission to think beyond where we are now, exploring new realities, new possibilities, bringing the full range of what it is to feel the world as it is now, and hopefully bringing some joy. My preoccupation now at Julie's Bicycle is about impact. What does rooted, love-led leadership look like? And our Creative Climate Leadership Programme has supported over 100 incredible people who together represent a new ecology of cultural practice. This is an important point. This means that we can't leave it just up to artists, because culture, just like any place, is an ecosystem. Changes to one component are felt by all. And instead of focusing just on artists or the art, we need to look at the whole, supporting all parts of the ecosystem to together rethink culture profoundly. And my second big priority at the moment is policy, because cultural policy is adrift, as we have heard from Rachel, it sits inside a wider policy frame. Culture needs to start with climate policy, and climate policy needs to start with culture. And in this moment where our futures are uncertain, where we have to remake everything, this creative process that we're engaged in, that doesn't always pretend to have all the answers, but that helps us find new truths in transformation and trust in each other, is more essential than ever. I'm so pleased to be with you today, because common sense doesn't seem to apply to so many of our leaders. Perhaps outrage, disruptive hope, and art will do better. And I can feel that that is absolutely oozing out of Adelaide today. I'm so glad to have been with you today. I'll stay for the rest of this session. I'd love to hear from you and for you to tell me what you're doing, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alison. That was really powerful. I could hear you speak, listen to you speak all day, especially with such passion. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, who will also be streaming in live. That's right, streaming in live. Yes, and that is Helen Salmon, who is the director of the British Council of Australia. Please welcome Helen.
Your leadership globally. I'd also like to thank Uncle Mickey and acknowledge the Ghana people. I'm joining you today from the lands of the Wongal people of the Eora Nation, and I would also like to acknowledge their global leadership and deep care for community, culture and country. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are here with us digitally or on the ground today. I'm the director of the British Council and the creative director of the UK-Australia Season programme here in Australia. The fact that the UK-Australia Season even exists at this moment is extraordinary. It was planned before the pandemic, and here we are after fire, flood, a global pandemic, reaching out across the globe to still share experiences and to reimagine. The UK-Australia Season is a year-long exploration of the theme, Who Are We Now? It's the largest cultural exchange between our two countries, but it's also a provocation. This is an opportunity to reflect more honestly on our past, examine our present as two countries, and perhaps most importantly, to consider now who we might be in the future. And clearly, climate change, the climate emergency, is the existential crisis of our time and our future. This bilateral season is all about collaboration, so it has been designed as a catalyst for long-term relationships and impacts. Australia is actually the third largest market for UK arts and culture. This is a very important place for British artists, and at this time of much-needed COVID recovery for the sector, 2/3 of the British companies who have received grants to be part of the season are collaborating for the first time with Australia. So this is literally the UK as you've never seen it before, and you will be seeing much of it in Adelaide. Our amazing South Australian partners, Adelaide Festival, the Writers' Festival, Adelaide Fringe, have presented 9 Australian collaborations and new commissions, all asking this question, who are we now? The British Council's aim is to build understanding and partnerships between people of our countries, communities and generations. But as Rachel noted, we were also formed, and we helped to form the Edinburgh Festival just after World War II for those very reasons, that those connections, important connections, and all the way along, mobility of people has been key to that process. Connecting people through shared experiences is my life's work and the life's work of many people here today, and we all know that empathy and that strong sense of interdependency is absolutely vital to our survival, but we have to find sustainable ways to do this. For myself and so many others, nature and connecting to nature was an absolute lifeline during the pandemic. So we're now in a situation where we have a population that's primed to protect and ready to connect with each other. And it will be our artists who will help us to come together and make sense of things. They will be the ones that will lead the way. It's essential that we share practice on days like today and continue to work together to explore new paradigms. What does international collaboration and exchange look like? How do we stay connected from opposite sides of the globe? And as Alison noted, artists and educators are also the vital advocates and communicators. It will be you that have the power to engage our society in how they contribute to the goals for our planet. Only yesterday I was at Sydney Biennale speaking with 6 British artists who are all climate activists, and through their medium they profoundly connect us with the natural world, both seen and unseen, in a way that no amount of discussion could do. They talked about decentering the human in our understanding of ecosystems, and that is absolutely part of the challenge that's posed to us all today. We also worked with Biennale at the beginning of this year on a sustainable materials for touring and exhibitions challenge, where we went out to the science and startup communities of both Australia and the UK. And materials were identified from reusable cable ties to blackouts that are made out of seaweed, all of which are now, 8 months later, being used at Sydney Biennale this week. Like this, the South Australian trailblazers in this area, Adelaide Festival in Woden, Adelaide, Sydney Biennale is now reassessing all of its practices, both moving away from the notion of exclusivity for visiting artists, getting more value out of those visits, to examining supply chains and ways of working. And we will be holding in early April a workshop looking at some of these new materials and practices with curators, designers, tour managers up here in Sydney. The British Council has a global program called the Climate Connection, which you can find online. It was developed by artists and educators in the lead up to the COP26 summit in Glasgow, which Alison was also absolutely integral to. And it provides a platform for dialogue, cooperation and action across our sectors. To date, it's worked with over 100 countries and partners and over 100 companies. And I would highly recommend that you have a look at the material available there. I'm very proud that this conversation today follows as part of that, continues that conversation from a very important event. I look forward to hearing the discussion that's about to open, and I would very much like to thank our partners who absolutely make things happen. Julie's Bicycle and the wonderful Alison Tickell, an absolute pioneer in the space. The Australia Council for the Arts, who are collaborating with the British Council during the season on a number of essential strategic programs and policy conversations. Rachel, Neil, Elaine, the whole team at the Adelaide Festival, but particularly the amazing producer of this event, Jeavons. And also I'd like to thank the financial support from the UK Great Campaign. This past year has thrown into sharp relief the fundamental role of arts and culture in creating this longed for human connection that we all have. The arts can help us reimagine our future, and they can help us address issues of equality, diversity, the climate crisis, our major global challenges. As always, it's going to be the artists and the thinkers who help us to understand where we are, but also, most importantly, where do we go from here? In the immediate term, where we go from here is to Adrian Collette. Adrian is the CEO of the Australia Council for the Arts, and it's been a privilege to work with him, and I look forward to hearing from him now. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Adrian Collette, CEO of the Australia Council. Thank you, Mr. O'Brien, for that lovely, warm welcome. I'm joining you from the lands of the Gadigal people and pay my respects to elders past and present. I'd also like to acknowledge all First Nations colleagues and peoples present here today for these vital conversations. Many of you will be familiar with the Australia Council, but for those who are not, we are the federal government's arts investment, development and advisory agency. Our purpose is to champion and invest in arts and creativity to benefit all Australians. As such, it's wonderful to be joining you for this discussion along with our colleagues at the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, the British Council, Julie's Bicycle and Reforest. For over 60,000 years, First Nations people have known the relationship between cultural practice, innovation and sustainability. These conversations will not be new. We are privileged to be joining them in some ways and coming together today on this land to learn from and understand more about who we are as a nation and how we can work together to create a sustainable future. It is not possible to talk today about the arts and the climate crisis without acknowledging the devastation, hardship and heartache from the current floods that many parts of Australia are experiencing. Coming on top of the challenges of the pandemic, earlier floods and bushfires, these continue to be trying times for many, including our artists, performers and creative workers, and the organisations that support them. Indeed, artists and cultural organisations are among the many to have been profoundly impacted by the floods, particularly in the New South Wales Northern Rivers region. While our artists have not been spared the devastation, they will have a vital role to play, as they have done before, in helping to connect and strengthen our communities as they rebuild and recover. We are currently facing multiple wicked problems. We must drive discussions about the role of the arts and the cultural sectors to respond to climate change and address the current and future challenges of environmental sustainability. As in so many other areas, our artists and creative workers will challenge, inform and inspire us as we address these issues. At the Australia Council, we have begun rethinking our commitment to cultural and global engagement. Rethinking and expanding the concept of mobility and international engagement has not only been a direct outcome of the global pandemic, it is essential to support Australian artists, creative workers and organisations to build and sustain international connections and careers. Our work expands opportunities for engagement through hybrid and online activities while international travel reopens. Our commitment extends to ensuring that the models we develop, including a rapid movement toward digital and online content, are both more sustainable and encourage deeper cultural engagement. Have we the skills and creative resourcefulness that will enable us to collaborate and to co-create to tackle these problems? I'm sure we'd like to think so, but some of our conversations about developing some more sustainable creative practices, given how we have gone about things in the past, are bound to be challenging and uncomfortable. We have a crucial role to play in informing and contributing to the many connections arts and culture have in our communities. Meetings like today are exciting because they can inform better policies and better outcomes, and the Australia Council has its role to play, along with our other partners, to inform policy and affect real change. Long after the current floods subside and the clean-up is completed, artists will remain on country, in community, helping us to make sense of the event, to reconnect and to recover, as local artists have done so many times before. Sustainable recovery needs creative approaches, collaborations, and unexpected partnerships to rebuild and reconnect communities. The podcast series, Creative Responders, an initiative of the Creative Recovery Network, shares stories and conversations with artists, emergency management experts, creative leaders and affected communities from all over Australia as they prepare, respond and recover from natural disaster. If you haven't seen them, take a look. Such telling examples of what art can do and how creativity can connect us. Elevating the value of arts and creativity in our public sphere and further investment will directly support the sustainability of our communities. So thank you once again to our partners that share a vision where the arts play a vital role in educating, inspiring and mobilising change. Of course, for good reason, some of our most powerful voices and inspiring leaders in climate action have been our young people. With renewed urgency, they are leading with conviction and commitment towards a better future. So with that in mind, it is my great pleasure to introduce Amber Brock-Fabel to continue our discussion.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank Uncle Mickey for the welcome to country. Firstly, I would also like to thank Adelaide Festival for staging Climate Crisis and the Arts, a free and sustainable event for the community where we can listen to and be inspired by amazing people and organisations that are already leading the change for climate justice. A lot of my work as an activist has been focused on marching and protesting in the streets, demanding a change and empowering young people, keeping our leaders accountable for the future of our planet. But today, we are not only here to demand change, we're here to celebrate and champion the change makers. Those mobilising art and culture to embrace climate action. Those amplifying the voices of First Nations people. Those inspiring broad industries to lead cultural change. And those who embed sustainability in their art practice. Despite numerous challenges, our artistic communities have presented us with immense opportunities to party with the planet. Everyone has a social responsibility regarding the climate crisis, and I know that it is overwhelming and very easy to feel disenfranchised, but creativity is powerful. It initiates conversations in response to world issues and empowers consciousness in everyday people. If we can imagine, we can create. If we can create, we can inspire. I am 17. The climate crisis was declared long before I was even born and has taken down consecutive governments in Australia on all sides of the political spectrum. But forget divisions, forget semantics. The people and organisations here are already creating substantial environmental change in our communities. As a young person, a lot of our popular culture is apocalyptic, from the novels we read to the movies we watch. We embrace art which is not too distant from the truth of our own futures. Art imitates life, and life informs art. Growing up is hard enough, but when there seems to be so much going on in the world, so many issues we have to face, and our leaders continuously making decisions for short-term gain, it is disheartening and it is unjust. So as young people, we have stopped waiting. We have become mobilised and united to carve out our own path forward, initiating a groundswell of positive action taken by young people, for young people. We've become creative, like the people and organisations here today. They're the people who are already reimagining and regenerating our environment. They are living and leading the transition of greening. They're our artists, our scientists, our innovators, our storytellers, our writers, our advocates. Those who create, inspiring us to explore environmental positivity. Those who write, educating us about a world of opportunity. And those who give, mobilising us to together unite in this movement. They're here today to share their stories, their knowledge, their action, so we can all reimagine a better future and creatively mobilise on climate action. The sheer fact that we are all here today is another step forward in initiating meaningful conversations and collective action. Just us being here and attending this event and hearing from amazing experts in their field, I have immense faith in our communities and in my generation and those that follow to embrace the change that is fundamentally needed for us to have any form of future on this planet and to create a just society. Anyone can do something, but everyone together creates change. Thank you and enjoy Climate Crisis and the Arts.
Art informs life and life informs art. That is just so true and so beautifully put. Thank you for your words. That has been an inspiring morning, and there's still the rest of the day to go, but can we please give our speakers
Rachel, Neil, Helen, Alison, Adrian, and Amber. Another round of applause, please. So today's program will include a mix of panel discussions over 2 stages. There'll be the plane tree stage down there. Yeah, great. I always get confused. So we've got the plane tree stage and the west stage. This is the west stage, where speakers will explore the power and potential of connecting the arts with climate action. This will include live performances, creative content streamed in from the UK and interstate, and a performance from the Bait Fridge Collective. In the sessions at the plane tree stage, there will be a deeper dive into the tangible actions available resources, and ways to get involved. These discussions will focus on topics that are particularly relevant for those working in the arts industry, but also anyone keen to just learn a little bit more about what we can all do to help. We'll begin back here at 10:30, which is now, in 2 minutes. And we'll be listening to The Power of Storytelling with Rona Glynn McDonald, Gabrielle Chan, Damon Gamo, and the moderator, Ben Brooker, followed by a performance by the wonderful Nancy Bates. So, I'll leave you all. Thank you, and remember that no action is too small, and if I can quote Amber, everyone working together creates change. Thank you very much.